Hello, everyone. Welcome to my podcast. My name is Gabriellebeth, and you are listening to the Bespoken Faith podcast. In my previous episode, I shared with you the details concerning my 10-year situationship. In a nutshell, it was a relationship that was pretty much doomed from the start. Ironically, similar to the relationship I'm going to share with you all today. No, but that 10-year relationship lasted as long as it did because me and this guy thought we loved each other. And on the surface, it really did seem like love, right? We had this appreciation for each other that we didn't find in anybody else. But I think in reality, we were nothing more than just best friends who could see a life with one another. But as much as we wanted to fit into each other's life and lifestyles, it just didn't work out. It's like a puzzle. If you take two pieces that clearly don't fit, you can keep turning those pieces and trying to attach them in any which way, but in the end, they just won't fit. You need to find the right puzzle piece in order to connect the two. And that's what it's like to date the wrong person. So if you haven't listened to any of my previous episodes, I would recommend listening to them before this one because it will really set the tone for this episode. It'll tell you about everything that I've went through to get me to this point in my life. But if this is the very first episode of mine that you're listening to, that's okay. We're going to call this the relationship that should have never happened, period. It's quite a wild story and definitely something that I'm not proud of. I cringe every time I think about this and the decisions that I made. Like, I am hoping and praying that by recording this podcast finally, I will be able to release these memories and release these thoughts that I keep revisiting, because I do kind of have a grudge against myself for ever allowing myself to enter in this relationship and just the stupid decisions that I made while dating this person. This relationship only lasted 6 months, but it was the most damaging relationship, and a lot can happen in a short amount of time. It's kind of like a fire. Entire forests don't burn down in the blink of an eye, right? Like, trees have to catch on fire and slowly the fire spreads, and that's what this relationship was like. So before I get started, please grab a drink, a snack, a buddy, a friend. Do whatever you gotta do. I will see you in 1 minute.
You have a voice. You should use it. You serve a God who gave you a gift. You should share it. You have the ability to create. Go create something. Hi, I'm Gabriellebeth, and you're listening to the Bespoken Faith podcast. My hope is to share truth, give advice, or even tell funny, not so funny stories. I may even share some poetry with y'all from time to time. So whatever we're talking about, I hope you feel welcome. And don't forget to love generously, be spoken, and have faith.
I cannot believe I'm about to share this story. I've kind of dreaded recording this podcast. For the record, I'm out of work right now. I'm currently house sitting / dog sitting, which I wish Rover would sponsor me. I found this gig through Rover, or this gig found me. These people went on vacation or somewhere. I assume vacation because it's a whole family who went. And they hired me to dog sit for them for the entire week. I'm making about $500 this week just from dog sitting. And it's not too bad. So if you are interested in dog sitting, or maybe you're just looking to make a little extra money, because there are gigs too where I literally just have to stop by, let the dog out, maybe feed them, and then that's it. And I get paid for it. So if Rover is something that you're interested in, I highly recommend it. And there is a link in the description that you can click that you can sign up through the link and start making money through Rover. I'm going to take a sip of my little drink here. This story begins in February of 2022, so last year. We're having a snowstorm and can't really go outside. We're kind of stuck inside. I live in North Carolina, so you know, if you live here, that they don't really do much for the roads when it storms, and many places close. So I was stuck at home with my parents on this snowy day, and my mom and I decided to go on TikTok Live. My mom at the time was really struggling with her faith. So we went on TikTok Live and we asked the question, is God real? Tell us why you think God is real. Because my mom would argue, is God even real? Like, how is it possible God is even real? So we went on this live to try to help her in her unbelief. Well, there was this guy in the live whose name, should I use his real name? We're going to call this guy Powder because I kid you not, he looks like Powder from the movie. It's funny because it's true. So Powder had a lot of wisdom to share, and I appreciated everything that he had to share and say, so I followed him, believer to believer. Well, then, shortly after he followed me, he sent me a DM on TikTok. And it wasn't just a, hey, how are you? Thanks for the follow message. I wish I would have saved the messages, but I didn't, unfortunately. Silly old me deleted everything. Pretty much. I mean, I have a couple of voicemails that I'm going to be sharing with you later, but he messaged me, and this should have been red flag number 1. For those of you watching on YouTube, I'm going to put a red flag counter on the screen just to see how many there are, because I know there's a lot. I reflect on this relationship and I'm like, that was a red flag. Wow, that was a red flag. If that wasn't the red flag, no, that one should have been the red flag for sure. But yeah, there were a lot of red flags. And when you're in this infatuation phase, you really tend to ignore the red flags. I actually heard somebody on TikTok yesterday describe it perfectly, that when you're in a new relationship, it's kind of like driving a car at 80 miles per hour. You can see the red flags kind of, but they're kind of blurred. So you just ignore them and you're like, there's really not that many red flags. I kind of see them, but like not really. And you just ignore them and you keep blowing past them. Then finally you start slowing down and then you finally see all the red flags that you should have been paying attention to earlier on. So the very first message I got from him was asking me if I could pray for him about something. And I just ignored it because in my mind I was like, you're a dude. Like, you don't have friends or a church member that you can go to and ask for prayer. You have to message a stranger that you met off of TikTok and ask them for prayer. So I thought that was really weird. It was strange, but I just brushed it off. So I didn't even respond to that message. And then a few weeks later, he messaged me again. And he said, hey, I was wondering if you would like to talk. Not anything more than friends. You just seem really cool and I would like to talk to you. So here's my number. If not, I understand. Have a blessed day. That should have been like... Just reading this back and saying it out loud, I'm like, gosh, Gabrielle, like, oh, Lord have mercy. So I honestly should have ignored that message because it was just cringy, right? But I was like, you know what? Maybe this guy really just needs a friend to talk to. And I was empathetic towards him. And a few days later, we spoke on the phone for the very first time. And he was actually really nice. So yeah, after only a few minutes of chatting with this person, I felt super comfortable with him and felt like I could talk to him for a while. The messed up part of all of this, I actually had a date with a guy who I met off of Hinge. I obviously left that detail out to Powder. I told him I was just meeting up with a friend. So I met up with this guy for coffee, and he's super professional. Like, our conversation was mostly focused on sports and business. And during this conversation, I'm only thinking about Powder. Like, I really just want to get over this date so I can go and talk to Powder again. So after that coffee date, I was actually very hungry. And I stopped by Chick-fil-A. And I ordered a salad. And I'm just eating in my car. And I give Powder another call. And a few minutes into the conversation, I'm like, crap. I think I like this guy. And my biggest advice to you that I had to learn through this experience is, please, I know it's so hard and nobody can tell you different, but please don't let your emotions get the best of you. Because what I learned is it is so exciting when you finally meet somebody and the conversation just flows and it's not the same boring, mundane narrative and you're able to just connect and you have similarities and the conversation's just easy. I mean, those conversations don't happen every day. And I guess I was in a place where I was really looking for love. But when it comes to dating, especially when you're dating for marriage, there's absolutely no rush. I know it feels like I need to be married by this age, or I really want to meet the love of my life already and just be married and have kids. But really, like, I know it sounds cheesy, but like, you have to wait on God's timing, because if you try to force it with somebody, you're going to get yourself so hurt. And not only are you going to end up hurt in the end, you're going to be dating the wrong person for you, and that person is going to be dating the wrong person for them. And you can try, like I mentioned earlier, you can try to fit the puzzle together, but there's always going to be a little bit of a discrepancy. Like, it's not going to perfectly fit. So it's okay to say, I'm really enjoying this conversation we're having. I want to continue to get to know this person, but let me take a breath and really ask myself, is this person the best thing for me? It might feel like the best thing for you right now, but it's so important to guard your heart with everything that you have, and don't start letting these feelings flutter before actually getting to know someone. Because there were red flags literally waving in my face. I was just ignoring all of these red flags because, one, we had really good chemistry and really good conversation, and two, because I thought he loved Jesus. Obviously, when you first start talking to somebody, they're going to be on their best behavior because they want you. They want you to like them. And they will tell you all the things you want to hear. So what I would do is take a deep, really deep breath and pray this prayer. Dear God, do not let my heart and my mind acknowledge emotions that I shouldn't be toyed with. I pray for discernment and wisdom when it comes to talking to this person. I ask you to lead me in the plans you have for me. And if this guy is meant to be in my life, make it known to me. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. And I'll share with you a little side story. I was getting DMs from a guy recently who was showing interest in me and wanting to date me. And this guy looked attractive and super fit. He was in the army and a bit of a Southern. And I'm just like, wow, this guy is out of my league. And I started getting nervous in my responses to him. But I was like, okay, be patient. Let's see if this guy actually meets my standards. And he didn't. He ended up being really suspicious, but I didn't have to explain anything to him. Like, me and this guy hadn't ever met before. We were just casually texting back and forth. So I ghosted him. I know, it's not okay to really ghost people, but that's what I did. And it really should be as easy as that. Like, don't settle for less than you know you're worth, and deep down know what you want. Because if you brush off these things very early on in the relationship, you're just going to continue to build resentment towards that person. And it's really not anybody's fault but your own, because God gives us this intuition for a reason. A lot of times intuition comes out in motherhood. You just get this instinct, but God really gives us this gift of intuition, and it's really something that we need to pray for and really just be discerning about, because your intuition or your gut will never steer you wrong. In the end, this is the only life that you get to live, and you don't want to always be questioning if the man you're with is actually the right man for you. So anyway, moving on. Over the next few days, Powder and I continued to talk. Then one night we FaceTime call. The conversation we have is very nice, but then we started talking on FaceTime every single night. It became a nightly thing. And we started to really develop strong feelings for each other. And in my heart, I really wanted to be asked out in person. Like, I just felt like that was the manly thing to do. But because we were completely infatuated with each other and entangled in each other's emotions, he asked me out over the phone one morning. And because I felt like I wanted to be with him, even though I hadn't physically met him in person yet, I said yes. I only recently started watching the show Love is Blind. And it's crazy to say that what happened with Powder and I is a very similar scenario. And I don't agree with the way the relationships are set up in Love is Blind, because even though it is possible to fall in love with someone before even meeting them face to face, it's not the correct way of doing things. So now here we are, boyfriend and girlfriend. We weren't planning to meet each other in person for another month yet. So really it was just so silly that we became official before actually meeting. But no one could tell us wrong. So at this point, I'm just so excited because I felt like I met the love of my life. I started telling everyone about him. and people reacted in the way I expected them to. And me being so naive, I was like, I love him. I don't care what anybody says. And I had an amazing group of friends at the time. And I met up with each of them to tell them that I met the love of my life. I mean, it's crazy news. And all of them had a similar thing to say. Because his resume didn't look that promising, he's 28 years old and he's been too afraid to get behind the wheel, so he doesn't have a driver's license, doesn't have a full-time job, and he works in a movie theater kitchen type thing, making $11 an hour. But I ignored all of that and focused on what I loved about him, that he loves God and him and I get along super well. Wait, that's really all I liked about him. Yeah. But because I was infatuated and blinded by love, I ignored every other red flag that was waving in front of my face. It didn't take long for him to tell me that he struggles with watching porn. Just 2 years prior to talking to me at the beginning of COVID, he tells me that he moved to Australia to be with a girl who, again, he never met. Then he confessed to me that he had hit this woman before. Hit her. Which I didn't hold that detail against him because that was before he gave his life to Christ. So I was like, okay, maybe God is really changing him. And then there were more superficial things that I didn't like about him, such as he didn't believe in owning a handgun or using a gun as a means of self-defense. I'm pro-gun. I purchased a gun this year, actually. He was only 2 inches taller than me, which really it felt like he was only an inch taller than me. He was very, very small, skinny, small boned, very, very, very tiny. And the first time I tried dating a guy who was smaller than me, I was like, there ain't no way, dog. I need a guy who can pick me up and throw me over his shoulder. I need a very strong guy. But for him to be 5'7" and weigh the same amount as I do, it was a very big turn off. His waist was even smaller than mine, and he had twiggy legs, didn't have much muscle, let alone meat on him at all whatsoever. He also didn't take care of his teeth. They were just rotting out of his mouth. He even made a comment one day saying, want to get matching dentures when we're older? But then there were more serious red flags that I ignored and truly should have never ignored. But let's continue on with the timeline, shall we? So about 2 weeks before I officially met Powder in person, I went to the mountains with my girlfriends for a bachelorette, and me and my 2 really close friends drove up together. And again, on this road trip, they both shared with me their concerns, and they said, Gabby, you've been through way too much to just settle, and the last thing we want to do is see you go through all of what you've been through just to settle for this guy. And they could see from a mile away that he was not the right person for me, but I was so blinded by infatuation, y'all, and I completely ignored them, and I really had to live and learn. And yeah, I just wanted to share that really quick. So we continued talking and everything's going great. And then we officially meet in person on April 23rd, 2022. And I'm just Twitter-peated and so excited to officially meet this guy who I've been talking to for over a month now. To be honest, I didn't pay attention to his physical features that much because I was just like, wow, I'm so excited. I love this man. I don't care what he looks like. Later on after that trip, I was looking back at photos and videos of him and I just thought, wow, he is actually very tiny, super, super skinny. If I sat on his lap, I would be scared of breaking his leg. But at the time, I didn't mind that. I also didn't mind his voice, which it kind of sounded like a frog voice. I'll try to demonstrate it.
Hi, how are you? What do you have going on today?
Something kind of like that. I also didn't mind his rotting teeth because when he smiled, he had a pretty nice smile, even though there were imperfections, obviously, but I'm getting kind of sick, like, even thinking about it, because I'm like, infatuation is a blinder of vision, y'all, and not just physical, okay? So on our first visit, we decided to spend the day in Charlotte. I decided to show him around. We went to a museum, a coffee shop, and we were just like the cutest couple to ever be birthed, right? It was a wonderful day. Then we went to dinner with my parents because they wanted to meet this guy. It was very awkward. Like, I realized in that moment that he wasn't a very good conversationalist, other than like with me. I mean, I guess it was different because I was a girl who he took high interest in, but like with my dad, he was very like shy and like kind of reserved, and that's not at all how I like want my future husband to be. Like, I want my future husband to be like kind of like businessy, but also humble and like very loving and just gentlemanlike and outgoing and fun. And I didn't get any of that from Powder. I was being my adorable, goofy self as always, and he was just quiet. Like, it was so awkward. Like, I get it, you're nervous, but my dad is one of the easiest guys to talk to. Well, if he likes you. Like, I'm even a super reserved, introverted individual, but with my dad, he's just the bomb. And I always have good conversation with him, like whenever him and I hang out. So anyways, we finish up with dinner and we say our goodbyes and go separate ways. Powder and I then go somewhere to play pool because he loved the game of pool and I did too. Then we pull into the driveway that night and I get a text from my dad saying he's a little shy, but he makes you happy. So I like him, and that just sent me over the moon because I was like, cool, like my dad likes him, like right on, like this is so awesome. That just had me overflowing with joy because I love my parents. I try my best to honor them. One of the biggest decisions I'm going to make in my life is who I spend the rest of my life with. I just thank God that it wasn't this guy. That night we say goodnight, and then the next day we go to church, and then after church we went to this barbecue place for lunch, and it was just really crappy. Like, I want to say it was Jim and Nick's. It was really terrible food. Like, you can get better at Wendy's. It was so terrible. Then after that, we went for coffee and walked around the park, and we just talked and continued to get to know each other. But that night, I made a very big mistake. So Powder had plans directly after our visit to go to Florida and visit his friend. Well, we decided it would be a great idea for him to fly back to Charlotte. That way we can drive up to Virginia, where he's from, and so I can meet his mother. And I get very nervous driving behind the wheel. Once tiredness hits me, I'm like, it's so hard for me to keep my eyes open. So if I'm driving more than a few hours, I like to drive with a driving buddy. Originally, when we made these plans, we had invited my mom to come with us. But then Powder said this to me. He said, I'm okay with your mom coming, but I really think it would be better for us to have the time by ourselves. And me, being completely in love with him, agreed to the idea. As if I completely forgot that I had to drive 6 hours back to Charlotte alone. So I already invited my mom, mind you, and I had to uninvite her. And this is when my mom begins to share with me her concerns. So when we went on this trip to Virginia and met his mom, she was a super nice lady, but something just felt off. Family is super important to me. I'm part Italian, and so I want to have a good relationship with my mother-in-law. I was just getting a weird feeling in the pit of my stomach, but I brushed off that feeling too. I forgot to mention that Powder's mom was a huge hoarder. I was never allowed to step foot inside of their house. When Powder's mom found out that I was coming for a visit, she said to him multiple times, make sure she knows that she cannot come inside of this house. And so I had to book my own hotel, and which, by the way, I booked a hotel for me to stay in because I was not welcome to stay at their house because there was so much crap everywhere, and Powder never paid me back for that hotel. That was just a mistake on my part. I thought he would be so kind too, and he never did. He also never paid for my gas. So essentially, I dropped, I don't know, $300, $400 on a trip that could have been easily avoided for me, not to mention all of the stress of driving because he couldn't drive. I did all of this just because he quote unquote forgot to book his return flight home, and I was trying to save him money. You know, it was just a really messed up situation. Yeah. I, for some reason, wanted to believe so badly that this guy was handpicked out by God for me. On the way home from that trip, I started to think about how already this relationship is driving a wedge between my mom and I. And I always prayed for a man that loved my family, because when you marry someone, you're not just marrying them. Their family then becomes your family. That was a piece of advice that my Uncle Rob gave me, so thank you, Uncle Rob. And I asked myself if I would mind having his mom as a mother-in-law, and I really didn't feel comfortable with it. But I picture my mother-in-law being someone I can be super close with and who I know would also be a wonderful grandmother. But I just didn't feel that with his mom. So at the beginning of May, I went on a girls' retreat with my friends, and I really wish I would have just told him that I was camping in the woods and I want to have my phone on me and just shut off my phone for the weekend, because this trip revealed a side of Powder that I should have paid very close attention to. He was very big on setting aside time to talk on the phone. It didn't matter what either of us had going on. If we didn't talk on the phone at night, he would get very upset, like extremely upset. So when we arrived at the place we were staying at, it was already pretty late. We hadn't even eaten dinner, so we ordered pizza, and we're all hanging out. And there comes a time where the girls are like, hey, let's all get in the hot tub. And I sadly had to turn down the hot tub because Powder was already like, come on, like, it's 11 o'clock at night, like, we need to talk. Let's talk. Like, it's past the time that you committed to. Like, just tell them you gotta go. Powder is calling me disrespectful, saying they had all night with me. Why can't he have me for 30 minutes? Oh, it gets better. It does. This night in particular, we're on a FaceTime call. I was so tired because I had to work all day, then drive to Asheville, so I was laying in bed and I fell asleep on the call. And he decided to, while being on video chat with me, step away from his phone, watch porn, and come back to the call as if nothing happened. Yeah. And you know what my response was when he said this to me? He didn't confess it right away. It was like a few weeks later, but I said to him, I hope you get the healing you need, but I'm not going to hold the sin against you. I just don't want this to carry on in our relationship. It happened in my last relationship that I was in, and here it is happening again. So going back to the girls' trip, there was a time when we were all playing pool and Powder just kept calling me over and over and over. And I finally answered him. And I said, I can't really talk now. I'm in the middle of a game. And he said to me, yes, you can stop what you're doing. I need to talk to you. And I don't remember what it was that he needed to so desperately tell me, but it wasn't something that couldn't wait until later. And he did this so often, where he would like demand my attention right now, say he needs to talk to me, he needs to get in touch with me, he has to say something to me. And then I'd get on the phone with him only to realize like it, one, wasn't something that important, and two, definitely wasn't something that couldn't wait for later. I look back on this girls' weekend and I'm incredibly sad for myself, because everyone around me I think could tell that I wasn't in a good relationship and that I deserved more. Even though they only saw a glimpse of this person, they could see a side of him that I was too infatuated to see at the time. And gosh, I was just an ugly person during this time. And little did I know that a few months later, I would cut all communication with every one of my friends. During this trip, Powder had also pestered me to tell the girls that I would be moving out of Charlotte sometime in the near future, and he kept asking me if I've told them yet, and I was very hesitant in telling them because moving out of your state and like away from everyone is a big decision. But he said to me that if I didn't tell them, then I wasn't taking our relationship seriously. And so out of respect for him, I did tell them. And the reason why he wanted me to move out of my home state, I later discovered, was because he wanted to have me all to himself. He didn't want to have to worry about sharing me with anybody, aka my friends and family. Like, I don't really give my time to many people, but he was making it a big deal that he would have me all to himself, and that once we were married, we would have all the time in the world together. And so, yeah, he really wanted me all to himself, and he wanted me under his control at all times. And I continue talking, and we're so in love. And he starts to mention to me the idea of proposing to me. Mind you, we hadn't even been official for 2 months yet. And I did say to him, you have to ask my dad for my hand in marriage. And he says to me, do I have to? And I say, yes, absolutely you have to. It's the respectful thing to do. It's not every day a man gets to have me. So he keeps trying to put it off. And he asks me if it's really important that I have to ask him. And he asked me if he could just text my dad asking him. And I say to him, this is the second most important question you're ever going to ask in your life. You absolutely have to ask him. If it can't wait for you to be here to ask him in person, the next step would be to call him. So if you're not going to ask him in person, you need to call him. And it was like pulling teeth to try to get him to call my dad to ask him. Like, if that wasn't a big red flag enough, it just showed, like, one, how this boy was raised, two, the little respect that he actually did have. About 2 weeks later, I went to Virginia and he proposed to me. I'm not sure why I said yes. In my heart, I knew we were nowhere near ready. And again, I look back on the day that he proposed and I'm just so sad for myself. Like, he didn't even wear a nice outfit. He didn't plan anything spectacular. We were at a kind of cool place. We went to this historic place in Virginia. I forget what it's called, but it was like a historic village. And I couldn't see that I was just selling myself short. I think about the first weekend him and I spent together, and had I evaluated our relationship with an open mind and saw it for what it truly was from the very beginning, I would not have made it to the end of that weekend. Even on that first weekend, I could tell that he wasn't somebody that I should be spending the rest of my life with. He just wasn't. And I was too blind to even see what was right in front of me. But if I did that, I wouldn't be here to tell the story today. So in a way, I'm kind of grateful that everything happened the way that they did. If I had just listened to the advice from my friends and listened to the advice from my family and listened to my gut, I wouldn't have this story to tell. And this episode is already getting pretty long, and I have a lot more to share with you all. So if you want to find out how the rest of this relationship transpired, then please continue listening to the next episode of the Bespoken Faith podcast. Be blessed, have faith, and I will talk to you very soon. This is part 1 of 2. So if you don't listen to part 2, I don't have nothing to say to you, okay? Just go to part 2. I love you all so much. Bye.